Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. I've said the last couple of videos, the goal for the end of training camp was to reach 200 subscribers overnight. Last video we went from 198 to 202. Always genuinely appreciative of all the support. I have a big goal in mind. It's 1,000 subscribers by the end of the season, whenever that may be for the Packers, hopefully with a deep postseason run into the Super Bowl in February. That'd be great. But that's the goal, to have 1,000. Appreciative for all 202 that have subscribed so far, others who have, of course, watched. Want to dive into today's topic, and I talked about him in a video, I think like a week or two ago. It's Matthew Golden and just the chatter around him. It feels different. It sounds different. I've been to a few training camp practices now, certainly not all of them, but it looks different. Feels different, sounds different, looks different with Matthew Golden. You listen to what Jordan Love said about him in an ESPN sit-down interview recently, what Matt LaFleur has said, many of his other teammates as well, even on the defensive side of the ball, guys going up against him. By the way, I love seeing Matthew Golden getting work in one-on-one drills against Keyshawn Nixon. There's no doubt that Green Bay views its top cornerback as Keyshawn Nixon. And to see Matthew Golden getting one-on-one reps consistently, not just, once in a blue moon, but consistent 1v1 reps in a 1v1 drill against Keyshawn Nixon. I don't think it's something that Green Bay is just like, oh, let's see how this looks. I think they're very high on Matthew Golden and what he's already shown and already displayed. And, there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be mistakes made along the way. But when I'm watching Matthew Golden at training camp, and I said in a video again, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, I'm trying to temper some of the expectations. I'm trying to remind myself, like, this is just training camp. Let's even see what it looks like in, the limited time he probably plays on Saturday against the New York Jets in the preseason opener. Matt LaFleur, it sounds like starters are going to play in some capacity. I believe all four quarterbacks should see playing time, according to what LaFleur had said to reporters on Thursday. Maybe it was Wednesday. But I'm excited to see Matthew Golden, but I keep trying to tell myself, like, try to temper it down a little bit. It's a training camp, and it's, summer workouts, and it's practicing against your own guys, and, you can't fully invest in what you're seeing in one-on-one drills or certain looks and things of that. Adrian Keyshawn's winning some of those battles against Matthew Golden. I think back-to-back days it was 2-1 in favor of Nixon over Golden, but he seems to every day or every other day make like a sensational play. It's not just a blip on the radar. It's becoming more consistent. And so I'm telling myself, like, try to temper it down a little bit. It's hard. Like, I'm watching him, and he just doesn't look like a rookie. And I think, to me, that's one of the biggest compliments I can give the dude right now is when I'm watching Matthew Golden, he fits in with the wide receiver group they have, where again, there's going to be mistakes made, lessons that have to be learned along the pathway as a rookie transitioning into the National Football League. But he doesn't look like a rookie. Like, if you didn't know any better and you're watching Matthew Golden at practice, you'd be like, man, this dude's electric. How long has he been in the league for? Like 3-4 years? And it's like, no, he was just drafted in April. And again, a lot of the stuff like Jordan Love, some of it is like boilerplate stuff that a quarterback will say. And, an organization, they're going to want to try to inject their rookies with confidence. There's messing around with teammates, going out to eat. No, give the tab, the bill to the rookie. And there's things of that nature. But an organization and a franchise, they want to pump up their rookies. They want to inject confidence in them. The last thing you want to do is destroy the good juju and the momentum that a rookie might be carrying into his first year in the National Football League. And so some of the stuff you hear is pretty typical, like coach speak about a rookie or quarterback speak about his rookie wide receiver, but some of it isn't. And I thought in Jordan Love's sit-down with ESPN recently that he said something at the end of a clip where he was asked about, I think it was like who has stood out the most throughout training camp, and he said Matthew Golden, or it was some question to the tune of that, and Love said, like, oh, he's showing up from day one, and he's showing his play style and what he's all about, and again, that's the boilerplate stuff, but at the end of the quote, Jordan Love said, and I quote, you can see he knows what he's doing, he's feeling confident, he's been playing lights out, he's going to be a stud. And I think Jordan Love just putting it bluntly like that shows, like, or at least puts a light onto how a lot of the teammates of Matthew Golden are feeling about him. Like, it's one thing to say, man, I'm excited about this guy, rookie wide receiver, another weapon for the offense. Can't wait to see him develop and, mature into a solid option in this offense. And Jordan Love's just like, this dude's going to be a stud. Like, he is absolutely going to be a stud. And I just, it sounds different. Like I said, the chatter around Matthew Golden. I was reading an article too from ESPN, and Jeremy Fowler did a write-up on what he noticed from his time spent at Packers camp in Green Bay. And the first bullet point he had after the bulk of the article, the first bullet point was all about Matthew Golden. And Fowler noted, people inside the Packers aren't quiet about their impressions of first-round receiver Matthew Golden, who has looked the part thus far. Two things that have stood out: his hands, he's not a body catcher, and his determination to be great. One person with the team pointed out that he hadn't dropped a pass through the first week plus of camp, and he connected on a 60-yard deep ball in 11-man earlier last week. And again, it sounds different, it feels different, and it looks different when you're watching Matthew Golden. Again, the compliment I can give him that I think does it the most justice, and this is just through my prism, and I'm sure someone out there watching this video can perhaps word it better than I, but I would just say he does not look like a rookie, and it gets you more giddy and more excited to see what he can bring to the table really from the get-go week one. Now, with how Green Bay's offense is currently constructed, no, I do not expect Matthew Golden to be a guy that, even if he bursts onto the scene and he becomes, a dynamite part of the offense, I just don't think it's tailored for him in his first year to get like 100 targets and 80 receptions and 1,000 yards and 10 or 11 touchdowns. I just don't think it's tailored that way. I had a video recently where I kind of threw out the idea that could the passing game in 2025 circulate around Tucker Kraft? I think when you look at the array of weapons on this offense, winning can cure a hell of a lot and solve a lot of issues and keep a lot of people happy, including players, right? Especially coaches, front office people. And winning can solve a lot. But there are still going to be, regardless of how much winning Green Bay is doing, and we'll find out early on with a couple of early tests against Detroit and Washington, albeit both at home. Those are two big boy tests right out of the gates this year for Green Bay in September to start the campaign. But there's a lot of mouths to feed. And, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson when he comes back, and then you have Matthew Golden and Savion Williams, two rookies, and we got Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave's back, and hopefully he stays healthy this year, and Josh Jacobs is your bell cow, but you have Marshawn Lloyd, who should be returning from injury soon, and are they going to keep 3 or 4 running backs, Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks? Like, and those are more depth pieces, but with this passing game, there's a lot of people to try to keep content, to try to keep happy, and, you could start out 3-0, 4-0, right? Like, if Green Bay rolls through Detroit, Washington, and then Cleveland and Dallas, and they're heading to the bye week 4-0, it's going to be, kumbaya, and everyone's going to be happy. But deep inside, let's say, one of those guys or two of those guys like Wicks and Reed just aren't getting targets, and they aren't a focal point at any point in time in the offense the first 4 weeks. Like, there's going to be frustration that certainly brews. So I'm going into things with Matthew Golden not expecting him to, light up a stat sheet week in and week out as a rookie. And it's not anything to do with Matthew Golden. It's sort of this scheme, how this offense is constructed currently, and how there's just so many parts to it that are going to have to get the ball, not necessarily on a week in, week out basis, but I look at Malik Neighbors last year, and what else did the Giants have on that offense? And it's not, a jab in the face to anyone else, but outside of Neighbors, rookie stud wide receiver who had the targets, had the receptions, had the yards, had the touchdowns. Saquon was gone, right? Darren Waller retired, tight end that they brought over the year prior. Malik Neighbors was it for the Giants. And they realized early, to their credit, this dude's really freaking good, right? Malik Neighbors is a stud. Let's just feed him the ball early. Let's feed him it often. But that was because New York really didn't have anything else going for him on offense outside of Malik Neighbors. And I'm looking at his numbers Malik Neighbors, is this correct? This seems crazy. Yeah, Malik Neighbors in 15 games last year, 170 targets, 109 receptions, 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns. If you're Green Bay, ideally, Matthew Golden is the stud. You identified first-round wide receiver. We haven't taken one since Javon Walker. It pans out. Matthew Golden turns into a go-to sure-handed number one threat of a wide receiver in this offense. But again, as a rookie and with all the pieces they already have in place, and Christian Watson will need his targets, his receptions, his attention paid towards him once he returns. And it's a good thing to have. Like, to me, there's no such thing as, man, there's too many pieces on this offense. There's too many weapons. I think a lot of time people will use that as a cop-out in basketball. Like, oh, there's only one ball to go around. And, it was really prevalent with those super teams, right? Like when LeBron and Wade and Bosh teamed up in Miami, and when you had Draymond's not much of an offensive threat, but the Golden State Warrior teams that had Steph Curry, Durant, and Klay Thompson, and people are like, well, if there is one problem, there's only one ball to go around. Like, they'll figure it out. You'd much rather have a team with KD, Klay, and Steph than the alternative, right, where you're having to go up against it. And so I don't look at the Packers offense and I'm like, wow, Reed, Wicks, Kraft, Musgrave, Dobbs, Golden, Savion Williams, Josh Jacobs, Lloyd. Like, man, there's too much. Like, they have too many options, too many weapons. I don't ever view it through that prism. But for the expectations trying to set them for Matthew Golden, he's not going to every week have 8 to 10 targets. It's just not realistic. And again, it's not a Golden thing. It's how this offense is constructed and how Matt LaFleur is going to roll out a blueprint week in and week out. Like, there will be games and weeks that come and go where Matthew Golden has like 2 catches, 31 yards, 3 targets. And you're going to be like, damn, get him the ball more, because the week before he might have had 90 yards and a touchdown on 6 receptions or something like that. But if he can establish himself, and again, I love seeing him get the work against Keyshawn Nixon in one-on-one drills. It seems like every other day there's a play where you're like, holy shit, like, this dude's good. Like, does not look like a rookie. And I think if he can keep stacking, I talked about with Kalen King, 7th round pick last year, like, if he can keep stacking moments and stacking days, it bodes well for him to have a shot to make the 53-man roster. Golden's making the final roster, right? That's your first round pick. But if Golden can keep stacking days and moments, the difference between he and a guy like Kalen King, who's just trying to make the roster, is with Golden, it can lead to bigger opportunities. It can lead to working more with the first team. His training camp in the preseason rolls along. And it's very, very, very early, and it is just training camp. But it's hard to not watch that in person and not think, man, I think the Packers got a pretty damn good one, right? Like, I think we look at past draft classes, and I'm thinking back to when they took Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt both in the first round, both on the defensive side out of Georgia a few years ago. You remember training camp and practices, and it's like, wow, Quay Walker's athleticism, like, the chatter was hyping him up, and it was injecting confidence and injecting faith and trust and all that stuff in Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt. And the same can be said for all the other, first rounders, like Jordan Morgan last year. And of course, injuries cost him a large part of his season, but it's like, man, flexibility. He can be left tackle. He can be right guard. Like, we love the versatility, what he showed at Arizona, and you're injecting that confidence, that trust in Jordan Morgan to try to really boost him up, because it can be daunting, right? Like, I don't know. I'm not speaking from experience, but I would imagine it's pretty daunting regardless of where you're taken, first pick of the draft, those expectations on your shoulders. Someone like Matthew Golden, who's not the number 1 overall pick, but he's the first time pick of a wide receiver for Green Bay in the first round in 2 decades, right? And so there's a different type of pressure there where, I like that Golden's coming into a situation in Green Bay where he is not going to be looked at and it's like, we need you to be our savior. Like Jordan Love, Matt LaFleur, they aren't looking at Matthew Golden like, look, we want a number 1 wide receiver. We desperately need a number 1 wide receiver. You have to be the guy. You need to step up every single week. There's not that burden on his shoulders. Like, I think he's entering a situation where you watch him at training camp, and I'm sure many of you have been to training camp, have seen the clips on Twitter, even though you're not supposed to be filming, right? Like, you're not supposed to be filming video at Packers practices, but you've seen the clips anyways, because people are sneaking out the phones and clicking the record button on the camera anyways. But you see it, and you get excited about it, and there is a level of expectation where it's like, man, Green Bay hasn't used a premier first-round pick on a wide receiver since Javon Walker, like, again, 2 decades ago. And so there's a little pressure from that aspect. But where there isn't pressure is, Malik Neighbors was the guy for the Giants last year. And it was like, if Malik Neighbors doesn't step up, the Giants already aren't projected to be that good. It's going to be really, really bad. There isn't that with Matthew Golden. It's like you have Dobbs, you have Wicks, you have Reed, you have Kraft, who I think is a budding star to be, maybe a superstar to be. You have Luke Musgrave back in the mix. You have Josh Jacobs, who, hell, if you need to, Josh Jacobs can tote it 30-plus times a game and be perfectly fine entering practice and then next week's game too. There's just so many options, and I think that will play well for Matthew Golden. But I would not be surprised if at the end of 2025 we're looking ahead to 2026 and we're like, Green Bay's got their number one wide receiver for the future, and it's Matthew Golden. I think he looks that good, that promising. The hands are good. The adjustment to the ball in the air. I go back to I'm trying to think of who was in coverage. I want to say it was Carrington Valentine, but I don't want to throw him under the bus in case it's wrong. It was one of those 1v1s a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and Jordan Love on a deep route in a 1v1 drill. I don't know if it was intentional or not, just to see how Golden would react, what he would do, but Love threw it pretty well inside on a deep ball, and Golden just like quickly, all in one motion, just glides in the air towards the inside and just plucks the ball out of the air, and you're like, damn. Like, Green Bay, I think, got a good one. So I'm trying to tell myself not to overreact or get too pumped up, because we've seen training camp darlings before. We've seen preseason darlings before. You know, a guy like Omar Brown, like, how sweet was that on family night? Like, the dude had 3 interceptions on family night for Green Bay. That's a guy who, if he makes the practice squad, it might be viewed as like a success for him this year. Truly, it might be. And now with, they have so much depth at safety, it's going to be hard, I would imagine, for him to carve out a 53-man roster spot. But what he's done so far in training camp, at minimum, Green Bay has to give it a second thought and give it a second look after what he's done in training camp. And it hasn't just been family night for him. Like, he's been good. And so you try not to overreact to things you see in training camp. But with a guy like Matthew Golden, it becomes increasingly more difficult not to, because it's becoming more consistent. Like, it's more rare when a practice goes by and Golden hasn't done something that's really damn good compared to the opposite, right? Like, it's becoming, training camp reports come out and the people are in attendance, or if you're in attendance and you see that dazzling play for Matthew Golden, you're like, you don't take it for granted, right? But you're like, this isn't that surprising anymore, because he seems to be doing this almost on a day in, day out basis at training camp. And he's doing it a lot of the time against the first team defense or against a guy like Keyshawn Nixon in a one-on-one drill. So I'm excited to see what it could become for Matthew Golden as a rookie, but I understand that he's not going to have, who was it, Brian Thomas for the Jags. Like, what numbers did he put up as a rookie last year? 133 targets, 87 receptions, nearly 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns. Like, I don't think Golden puts up those type of numbers. I think he's capable of it. I think he's very capable of it. But Green Bay's offense for this year, again, with how it's built, almost like won't allow it. And that's not a bad thing, because, again, I don't want all the pressure on Matthew Golden's shoulders as a rookie. Like, save us, save our passing game. Wicks and Reed were both top 5 in drops last year. The passing game seemed stagnant in the second half down the stretch in the playoff game against Philadelphia. Like, I think Reed and Wicks are going to be fine. I think the passing game is going to be fine. Golden's going to be a big part of it, but it's not going to be to the degree that you saw with Neighbors in New York or Brian Thomas in Jacksonville. I think down the road it could become that with Matthew Golden if he establishes himself as a true number one option. A la what we've seen in the past when Rodgers was at the helm with Jordy Nelson or Davante Adams. And I'm not comparing the archetype. I'm not comparing Matthew Golden and how he is as a receiver to Davante Adams. They're two very, very different wide receivers. I'm merely comparing the fact that when Davante Adams was at the peak of his powers in Green Bay, that was a number one wide receiver. That was a go-to option for Aaron Rodgers in the passing game. That was, hey, it's third and medium. I'm going to trust Davante to make a play. And you saw the same thing in Jordy Nelson's years when he was at the peak of his powers. If Matthew Golden keeps ascending towards that, I think year 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth, he could become that wide receiver where he's the number one. Like, hey, we're in a pinch. We need to make a play. We need to move the sticks. I'm going to trust Matthew Golden to go out there, make a play, make his man miss, and find a way to move the sticks or find a find a soft spot in the zone coverage and make a play and move the chains and keep the drive alive. I think he can develop into that. It just feels like a great spot where there won't be pressure on him to, produce to the level that a Neighbors or a Thomas did last year. If it happens, great. I just don't see it. And again, it's not a golden thing. It's how Green Bay's offense is constructed. But in the years to come, if he's on that trajectory, he could become that, right? Where he's getting number one type receiver, targets, receptions, yards, touchdowns, so on and so forth. It sounds different. And it's one thing for myself and my amateur eye to be at a training camp practice and witness and be like, man, it feels different with Matthew Golden. Like I said, it doesn't look like you're watching a rookie. It doesn't feel like it. But then to hear Jordan Love say, this dude's a stud. This dude's going to be an absolute stud. His words, right? And then you see Jeremy Fowler's report on ESPN, and he's like, yeah, people inside the building, coaches, front office, what was it he said? They are not quiet about their impression. Yeah. People inside the Packers aren't quiet about their impressions of first-round receiver Matthew Golden, who has looked the part thus far. Two things that have stood out: his hands, he's not a body catcher, his determination to be great. One person with the team pointed out that he hadn't dropped a pass through the first week plus of camp, connected on a 60-yard deep ball, an 11-man earlier last week. Again, it's people inside the building where it's just different. It's not the normal rah-rah hype up of a rookie where you're trying to make sure they're confident going into their first year. The Packers are almost adding a little more pressure, another layer of it, with Jordan Love saying, yeah, this dude's going to be a stud, and Packers inside the building telling Jeremy Fowler and ESPN, yeah, he's definitely looked the part. The hands, the determination. Dude hasn't dropped a pass. First week plus of training camp. It sounds different, looks different, feels different with Matthew Golden. We'll see how it all kind of comes together. He's certainly a guy, because it is your first-round pick, you're excited to see Saturday in his preseason debut, along with the Packers' 2025 preseason debut against the New York Jets. So we'll see, but could be completely wrong on this. Maybe it doesn't all come together for Matthew Golden, and maybe he kind of slides in more as a number 2 or a number 3 wide receiver. I would just say early indications are the Packers aren't going to directly say that dude's going to be a number 1 wide receiver for us for the long haul. Probably won't happen as a rookie, but down the road, that's a surefire number 1 wide receiver. They aren't going to be that direct, that blunt about it. But the little breadcrumbs that are being left along the way, it certainly feels that way. It sounds like they believe that could be the case. Let me know what you guys and gals think. Again, over 200 subscribers, wanted it by the end of training camp. Hit it in early August. Always appreciative of all the support. Goal by the end of the season is to get to 1,000. I have different things planned, different videos, different content ideas that will be unraveling throughout the preseason, I'll say, and the regular season. Please click subscribe if you haven't already. I don't know why that was so tough to say. It is Mitch. I am on YouTube. Always appreciative of all the support. We'll see you next time.